honey badgers. It is just shy of 9 a.m. when I'm filming this. Just real quick, if you're typically here for my diamond painting content, this is where we're at on the Star or Skull and Rose kit. So yeah, I decided not to do the grid outlay on this. I decided just to do half and half canvas. I don't know, it felt easier for some reason. So that's what I've been doing. But because of all the confetti in this, my eyeballs need a break sometimes. So yeah, this is as far as I've gotten so far. The flower is coming together. The words are cleaned up. I did the words up there too, but the plastic is kind of obscuring that. But we're actually not here to talk about diamond painting for this video. Today we're going to do a little bit of one of those detour videos where I talk about something else I have rolling around in my head from time to time. So today we're going to talk about me trying to figure out a way to make makeshift paper logs for the fire pit. I don't have wood burning fireplaces inside my house. All my fireplaces in here are electric, but I do have a burn pit outside. And yeah, let me just sit down and get into the origin story of how this this video topic came along. So yeah, the way the world is now, it's very people-y, it's very chaotic, especially in stores. And yeah, when I go out, the combination of store chaos plus my base level programming of social anxiety gets together, and I end up doing a lot of Amazon shopping. I know, I'm quirky that way. But the thing with Amazon packaging when you do orders is a lot of times they put in these paper I don't know what they're even in there for, because they don't really do a whole lot of protection, but they just kind of stuff it on the top of your box whenever you order something. My whole life, I've always strived to be someone who walks as gently as possible on the earth. So I'm very into reusing materials as much as possible, composting, recycling, repurposing, all of that good stuff. So I keep all of the papers. And sometimes I do use them for craft projects when I need, you know, paint paper, scrap paper to when I'm doing painting projects and you need to put down the scrap paper and all that. But I have a lot of the paper building up now because I do a lot of Amazon shopping and browsing. So the idea came to me, how could I, because I use these for kindling anyway, as far as like fire starters in the fire pit, but a lot of times I just end up bundling them up and throwing them in the pit. But I've got so many now that it's starting to get a messy big pile of paper that's taking up a lot of space the way it is now, as far as just like shoved into a bag the way it is. So I was thinking, how could I streamline it? And I came up with the idea of how can I turn these into easier to ignite paper bricks, paper logs. And I remembered years ago seeing the idea of these, even like early 2000s, I remember seeing these metal things where they almost look like the old school can crushers that you could use to put on the wall to crush cans before recycling, but it was for making paper bricks that you could use in a fireplace. And I remember seeing these things and being curious about them, but anytime I saw the reviews for them, the reviews were always pretty poor. I mean, there'd be a couple people in there where were like, oh, mine worked great, but most people said that the handles on them always felt kind of flimsy and like they were going to snap or bend at any moment. And even on the more expensive versions of the modern brick makers, I still see reviews of that, because I went and looked them up again the other day. I'm like, are those things still around? And sure enough, they are still around. They look almost identical to the ones I remember seeing over a decade ago. And the reviews are still saying that the arms on these folding machines still feel flimsy, even though these machines, they're not terribly cheap, even for the lower end ones. The lowest ones I was seeing were still like 25 to 50 bucks. And then you have more advanced versions, bigger versions that can go up to like $80 to $100. But all of the reviews I was saying, they all, no matter the manufacturer, they all were saying it's too flimsy still. And so it kind of sent me down this rabbit hole of like, okay, is there an older version? Is there something that was like, because sometimes you can go on eBay and see that. Sometimes people will have like an older version, antique vintage version of a tool that could be useful now, but like, you know, the way it is now, a lot of stuff that was made 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, it's all like stronger somehow. It's the things that are made now are a lot more flimsier. They're made for what is the term? It's like planned obsolescence. I think that's what they call it, where manufacturers and companies, they intentionally make their products kind of shittier so that you're bound to buying them more often, because it's not profitable for them to make a really good product that you're going to use for years on end if you never have to rebuy it. So that's the mindset anyway of modern manufacturers. So that's why a lot of stuff is just made much shoddier than it used to be, is that it just makes people more money because you're forced to buy it more often. But I have a problem that I need solved. So I was looking around and I discovered that the idea of using scrap paper and scrap newspaper and all that, apparently as far as like turning that into a paper roll that you could put in the fireplace, apparently that dates back to like early 1900s, maybe even like Victorian times, because I was finding old versions of like cast iron turners that people would use to make their fireplace logs from old newspapers. And apparently this was kind of interesting reading about this, because I was like, how do these things work? Because I understood the idea of the hand crank and all of that, but apparently there was also a process of making this solution out of sometimes I read it was some form of laundry detergent, or sometimes it was cooking oil, something like that. I don't know, like animal fat grease. I'm not quite sure, but they would soak it in stuff, and I guess that would work as like an accelerant over the paper so that it would catch easier. Whenever I've put just the paper into my fire pit, as long as the paper is dry, I've never had an issue with it catching. Anytime I've had a little bit of an issue where, you know, maybe if you try to start a fire on a little bit of a colder day, just taking a little extra time for that initial flame to catch, every so often I might throw just a little sprinkle of like grill lighter fluid on the fire pit and use like a long reach match on the pit, and that seems to work if I'm having trouble starting it. But most of the time, as long as the paper is dry, I've never had too much trouble with these things igniting. That's one of the reasons I hold on to this paper, because I've discovered it catches flame really nicely when you need a quick fire starter. So looking at all of that, and I also found one vintage version that got me on the idea of this, where I think it dates back to like the 60s or 70s, and it looks like some sort of like hand tool where you would wrap the paper around this hand-held stick thing. And from what I've read about, I forget what they call it, I'll flash it up on the screen because I found a picture of one. I forget what they call it, but apparently the directions said to make a roll using this hand tool, and then it said to like tie off once you got a decent sized roll, to tie it off with metal. Like it suggested using what I'm guessing is the vintage version of like basically a bread tie wrapper, or like a metal twist tie. But then I was thinking, like, you're gonna put metal in your fire pit, in the fireplace? That didn't love that idea, because what I do with my fire ash is I mix it with compost soil and I put it in my flower beds and stuff. And so I don't really like the idea of having metal in there. So I'm doing all this processing in my head, and I came up with this idea of, I have all this extra scrap thread from when I've done cross stitch projects. This is all like leftover thread and like spare spools I got when I was running low or something like that. So I have a bunch of that. Since I got into diamond painting, I don't do needlework quite as often. but I have all the materials for it still, so I had that sitting around. So I was thinking, like, well, that's cotton thread. That's better than putting metal into the ash. So I thought about doing that, but I was doing a practice roll because, you know, I'm not going to come on camera and show you guys how to do something without at least 15-20 minutes expertise, right? So I was sitting here practicing with how I was going to roll it, and then when I got to the end of it, I realized I could just kind of make like a little flip tail here at the end of it, and then use this end as sort of an igniter. Maybe you know, use that as like the starter catch and let it work that way. And I was also kind of pressing in on the sides to make some space for air pockets in there, so flames could catch in there. And then I was also making the sides here a little bit loose so that air could catch in there a little bit, because you don't want it too tight, because if you make it super tight, there's not going to be any oxygen for the flame to catch. And I don't know if I told this story. I might have told the story somewhere in one of my videos, but there was a time when I was really little, before I started kindergarten and all that, where my mom would go to work and my dad was at home, because my dad was in the military, but then he got medically discharged, so he was at home a lot, with disability. And so when he wasn't ever quite sure my brother's a few years older than I am, so he would be in school, but like I would be home, and my dad, you know, would have errands he'd want to do for the day, but sometimes he wasn't quite sure. Like, my parents couldn't afford daycare, so a lot of times we just went on adventures with my dad, because he couldn't afford to like leave me with somebody all the time. And so one of the trips was sometimes when I was little, he had a friend that owned a cigar shop, and he would go visit him a lot because my dad was a cigar smoker. And so when I'm super little, this was in the 90s, or yeah, it's pretty much, yeah, it was the 90s by then. I was born in the 80s, so I had to do the math. But yeah, by then it was the 90s. Or maybe tail end of the 80s. I don't know. Not relevant. But yeah, when I was little, we used to go to this guy's cigar shop, and the guys were always really cool. And so that was sort of like my daycare of sorts, is that I would go hang out with my dad and his friends at this guy's cigar shop. And so they would kind of joke around, put me up on the stool and be like, hey, you want to learn how to wrap cigars? And so yeah, that would be really frowned upon these days, I'm sure. But back then, it was just a thing that happened. So yeah, I would be behind the counter with this guy's shop, just kind of play rolling on cigars. So this kind of reminded me of that. This would be a really shoddy thing in his shop. This would never pass muster, obviously. But it just kind of reminded me of that. But anyway, that's what this video is. It's just sort of a chill kind of, hey, this might be something you could maybe have a takeaway from. When I walked outside this morning, I'd gotten so used to it being kind of balls hot in the south still, and then we had a few days of storming, and I thought, oh, okay, well, now I got used to that humidity. I went outside today and it felt like a walk-in cooler outside, and I wasn't quite ready, and I had to go run out in the yard for something for a minute outside, and I go out and I'm in like t-shirt and bare feet, and I'm like, oh whoa, you hit that wall of cold. And I was like, oh, that's right, it is October now. That reminder. So timing of this might be more relevant than I intended. So yeah, this is what I was kind of working on today. I mean, obviously I haven't tested any of these, but yeah, it's just something I thought I would toy around with. So yeah, if you too also, in addition to whatever, have a pile of all these papers, I brought a few of them in here to try to test this on camera. I didn't do anything special to this. I basically just took, because whenever Amazon sends these, they're always different lengths. So basically what I do is I take a bunch of them, I figure out where the shortest pieces are, start with raveling those on the inside and then work my way to the larger pieces on the outside. So let me organize some of this. I've got like a whole massive pile of this sitting out in the kitchen that I want to organize, but I brought a little bit in here to do on camera. So this looks like one of the shorter pieces. So I don't do anything special as far as like, I'm not gonna perfectly straighten them out, iron them out, anything like that, because when I was thinking about it, I don't feel like it's necessary since they're just going to be kindling, right? So I just kind of do like, I don't know, just sort of instinctually do it, where you just start with a good, doesn't have to be a super tight roll, like I said, because you need it to have some oxygen flow for the flame to get in there. And, you know, as I mentioned, I think kind of like cigar wrapping, but if it was a super, super shitty, you wouldn't give it to your friend on their best day kind of cigar where you're just, but yeah, you need to do something with it. Do not take this as like skills of what I did back then, but it's kind of in that vein. That's kind of what we're thinking of, to like flatten it out a little bit. Because if you've never done cigar wrapping, a lot of times what they do is like, it's more than one leaf. Since we're just having conversation here, right? A lot of times you'll have a leaf like this and a leaf like that, and you'll sort of wrap them together. So we're not getting all that fancy with this. But what I was doing is kind of weaving it back and forth a little bit. So like if I felt this side getting a little thick, I'd kind of pull the paper and put a little bit more thickness on this side maybe. And see, it's starting to get that cigar shape a little bit, but there's no like real perfect way to do this. I mean, if you come out with a little flower cone, that could probably work too. Little Olympic torch. But yeah, that can go in the center. And then take longer pieces. So yeah, once I figured out that little tuck at the end, that's why I was thinking maybe I don't need the thread at all, because this is sort of holding together. Untwist this a little bit, but that is something you can kind of play around with. That's sort of what I did with this, and there's a few more inside where I was just sort of kind of playing with structure, where I would twist it a little bit and maybe do a wrap. Whoop, hold on. Kind of hold the initial tail there and then sort of do a wrap that way, kind of build up a more like branch formation on it. And throw those in there a little bit. I don't know, man. I'm just playing around with this. I mean, the idea is it's just supposed to be kindling, right? So maybe you do one layer in the twisty pattern. So you got that bundled up, but see how I still kept it kind of loose so that there's still airflow that can get in there. And if this is a little bit loose, like I did with the end there, you can find a place you can maybe do a little tuck, just to hold that in place while you're setting up for the next layer. We'll just do another wrap. Okay. This one's getting kind of thick, and I don't want them like super, super thick. So actually with this one, Let me redo this a little bit. And just do, so I just wrapped it like that, and then there's a little space here, and I can just take this tail, tuck it through, and there we go. You can pull this down a little bit. So yeah, I'm thinking that's what I'll probably do with all these papers, is just make little, they almost look like little sage bundles. If you wanted to try that solution, I'm sure there's something online that tells you the exact measurements as far as like using the cooking oil or the laundry detergent solution. I'm sure there's recipes for that online. I'm not going to mess with that, but that is something you could look up if you want to, you know, do an extra step and soak these in that, so that, you know, they have that coating on them. Because I know that is a thing that when you get those, I forget the name of them. Are they just called like flame logs or something like that? Those pre-made compressed logs that you can get that are, they have paper over them, but the paper and the log inside, they all have a layer of the accelerant type stuff in there. That's one of the reasons why they ignite so fast. So that is something you could look into if you want to do an extra step on these. But I'm just thinking of like, I've got this paper all over the place, so I'm just thinking of like a more condensed way I can store them and still use them and still, you know, make use of them. So yeah, I just thought I would do a little video on this, a little idea I had. Feel free to share some ideas below if you want to add to the topic. But yeah, hope this was in some way useful. And yeah, happy Amazon shopping. Thanks for stopping by, and we will talk soon. Bye guys.